Carl Jung's most dangerous discovery had nothing to do with mental illness. It was about people who see what others can't, and why this rare ability destroys most of them. Jung noticed a disturbing pattern in his patients. Some of them could walk into a room and instantly sense who was lying, who was angry but hiding it, who carried secret grief. These people detected unconscious tensions others never noticed. Their perception was razor sharp, too sharp. Jung called it differentiated perception, the ability to read micro-expressions, hidden emotions, and unconscious signals that most brains filter out. On paper, this sounds like a gift. In practice, it was closer to a curse, because every single patient who possessed it ended up isolated, exhausted, and unable to maintain ordinary relationships. Not because they were unstable, but because they could not turn it off. Imagine seeing every mask, every lie, every contradiction people carry. Imagine being unable to participate in small talk because you instantly feel the pain behind the smile. That's what Jung observed. His patients weren't delusional. Their insights proved accurate when he tested them. They were simply perceiving reality at a level society couldn't handle. One case in 1913 forced Jung to confront how dangerous this ability could be. A woman came to him during the period when Jung himself was breaking away from Freud. She was highly introverted, intuitive, and immediately sensed psychological currents in any environment. Jung's notes describe her with chilling clarity. The patient displays an extraordinary capacity for perceiving unconscious contents in others, but this faculty causes her considerable distress rather than advantage. She couldn't keep friends. People felt exposed around her. She couldn't hold jobs. Her presence destabilized group dynamics because she silently revealed the unconscious agreements people rely on to function together. She lived in a different reality, one where the unconscious wasn't hidden but blindingly visible. Jung realized something crucial. He wasn't treating pathology. He was witnessing what happens when the unconscious becomes too conscious. This wasn't madness. It was an evolutionary overshoot, consciousness tuned so high it became socially dangerous. And yet, the danger went deeper, because these people weren't just perceiving individuals. They were absorbing the entire atmosphere of the collective unconscious around them. Jung began calling this participation mystique, a state where the boundaries between self and others collapse. The person becomes a mirror for everything unspoken in a group. They don't just hear words. They absorb unexpressed fears, hidden desires, and repressed conflicts. Modern science has confirmed part of this. Dr. Elaine Aron's research on highly sensitive persons shows that about 20% of people process stimuli with greater depth. But Jung was looking at something rarer. Roughly 1% of people, what he called the introverted intuitive type, not only feel deeply but also perceive unconscious patterns directly. They see the depression behind laughter. They sense the resentment beneath politeness. They notice the collective shadow groups silently agree to ignore. And Jung wrote the words that still send a chill. The danger lies not in the perception itself, but in the psychic isolation it creates. When one sees clearly what others cannot or will not see, one becomes a mirror that society cannot bear to look into. That mirror is why society rejects them, and why Jung considered this ability both extraordinary and profoundly dangerous. The real danger of seeing what others don't isn't the perception itself, it's what happens next. Jung discovered that when highly perceptive individuals reflect hidden truths back to others, they trigger an unconscious defense mechanism called shadow projection. Here's how it works. Every person carries qualities they deny: aggression, envy, selfishness, fear. Jung called this the shadow. Most people never integrate it. They bury it, pretend it doesn't exist, and build social masks to hide it. But when someone with differentiated perception looks at them, that mask shatters, and instead of facing the reflection, the unconscious chooses the easier path: attack the mirror. Jung documented this pattern again and again. Patients who could see unconscious content with startling clarity were systematically blamed for creating problems that already existed. A perceptive woman might say, "I think you're upset, even though you're smiling." Instead of thanking her, people accused her of being negative. A man might warn his colleague that their marriage looked unstable. Months later, the divorce would happen, but the colleague remembered only the discomfort he felt being judged. Jung realized this wasn't coincidence. It was a law of the psyche. He wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But for most people, it is easier to attack the one who reflects than to examine what is being reflected." This is the birth of the scapegoat phenomenon. Groups unconsciously assign the problem role to the person who sees too clearly. Not because that person is toxic, but because they reveal the toxicity already present. The group cannot bear it. Families do this, companies do this, entire societies do this. Jung wrote, "The bearer of superior perception becomes the repository for all that the group cannot consciously acknowledge about itself." That's why the perceptive individual doesn't just feel misunderstood. They feel hunted, attacked for truths they never asked to see. Jung's patients described this feeling over and over. "People hate me for noticing things I can't unsee. Every time I speak the truth, I lose another friend. It feels like I'm being punished for seeing reality too clearly." And they were right, because society depends on collective unconscious agreements, unspoken contracts about what everyone agrees to ignore. We all pretend certain things aren't there. The marriage isn't falling apart. The boss isn't corrupt. The system isn't rigged. These illusions keep groups stable. But the perceptive individual violates those contracts simply by existing authentically. And groups retaliate by making them the scapegoat. This is why many of Jung's most intuitive patients ended up isolated. Not because they wanted to be alone, but because every group they entered eventually pushed them out. Their clarity was too disruptive. And yet, Jung noticed something even more complex. Not all intuitive perceivers processed their gift the same way. In fact, he documented 4 distinct patterns of how people carried this dangerous ability. Each came with its own burden. Jung realized not every perceptive person carried their gift in the same way. The ability to see unconscious patterns could manifest in radically different forms, each with its own dangers. He identified 4 distinct types of introverted intuitive perceivers. Type 1, the feeling intuitive. These individuals don't just observe emotions, they absorb them. They enter a room and instantly feel other people's unlived emotions in their own body. Grief that isn't theirs, anger that doesn't belong to them, despair they've never experienced personally. Jung described them as living in a state of perpetual emotional contagion. The boundary between self and other collapses. They wake up exhausted, carrying feelings they never generated. The cost? They often can't tell where their own emotional life ends and where someone else's begins. Type 2, the thinking intuitive. These people don't feel others' pain directly. Instead, they see the patterns and the outcomes. Jung documented cases where such patients could forecast breakups, financial ruin, or health crises months before they happened. Not because they were analyzing logically, but because their unconscious pattern recognition was that sharp. Jung wrote, "They perceive the logical conclusions of unconscious processes before others are aware those processes exist. The cost? Others view them as cold, judgmental, or jinxing events. Their predictions come true, but instead of being valued, they are resented." Type 3, the sensation intuitive. These individuals feel unconscious tension as physical sensations. They sense illness before symptoms. They detect fatigue no one admits. They feel bodily signals of stress or dishonesty in others. Jung observed them acting as early warning systems, predicting collapse of health or breakdown of balance before anyone else noticed. But instead of being thanked, they were often dismissed as hypochondriacs or alarmists. Type 4, the pure intuitive. The rarest and the most tragic. These individuals see everything, but lack the structure to process it. They live in constant overwhelm, flooded by unconscious information without the tools to organize it. Jung described them as living in perpetual overwhelm, receiving vast amounts of unconscious content without adequate structure for constructive expression. They are visionaries who can't translate their visions. Prophets who drown in the flood of what they perceive. Jung called this paradox the problem of the superior function, when your greatest psychological strength becomes your greatest burden. And he warned, without proper integration, every type faces the same fate. Isolation, exhaustion, identity dissolution, because when you see too much, you threaten the unconscious agreements that keep society stable. And when you carry too much, you risk losing the line between what's yours and what belongs to everyone else. That's why Jung insisted this discovery wasn't just fascinating, it was dangerous. Seeing what others don't can destroy you, unless you learn how to integrate it. But before integration can even begin, you need to understand the 3 core dangers Jung uncovered. The traps that crush nearly every perceptive person who fails to master their gift. Jung didn't just admire these perceptive individuals. He feared for them, because their gift carried 3 distinct dangers that, left unchecked, could destroy a person from the inside out. Danger 1, disruption of the collective unconscious. Society doesn't run on truth, it runs on shared illusions, silent agreements about what will be ignored to keep groups functioning. Families pretend not to see dysfunction. Companies ignore corruption. Communities overlook hypocrisy. The person who perceives too clearly breaks these unspoken contracts just by existing. Jung wrote, "The individual who perceives too clearly threatens the collective agreements upon which social cohesion depends." They become destabilizers not because they cause problems, but because they reveal them, and groups always punish the one who shatters the illusion. That's why highly perceptive individuals so often become scapegoats. Not villains, not rebels, but mirrors society cannot bear to look into. Danger 2, psychological isolation. The curse of consciousness, Jung observed, is that it cannot be shared with those who do not possess it. When you see clearly what others cannot, you become an island in an ocean of unconsciousness. Conversations feel hollow, friendships fracture, relationships collapse under the weight of unspoken truths. Jung described it bluntly. The individual becomes an island of awareness in an ocean of unconsciousness. This isn't just loneliness, it's existential exile. The sense of living in a different reality than everyone else. A private world of clarity no one else can enter. And over time, that isolation grinds a person down. It's not rejection by one person or one group. It's separation from the entire fabric of human connection. Danger 3, identity dissolution. The most dangerous of all. Perceptive individuals often absorb unconscious material from others so completely that they lose track of what is truly theirs. Jung called this state participation mystique. Boundaries dissolve. The person becomes merged with the psychic atmosphere around them. One day they're furious, but it's not their anger. The next they're despondent, but it's not their depression. Their sense of self dissolves in the flood of other people's shadows. Jung warned, The danger is not merely social exile, but psychological annihilation. Not just being isolated from society, but being erased from within. This is why Jung called the discovery so dangerous. Because superior perception without integration is not a gift, it's a slow-burning self-destruction. But Jung didn't stop at diagnosis. He developed a method to save these individuals, a way to keep their gift without letting it consume them. He called it the individuation process, and it begins with one simple task: learning to separate what belongs to you from what belongs to everyone else. Jung refused to accept that superior perception had to end in collapse. He saw too many patients consumed by their gift, but he also discovered a path to survival. He called it the individuation process, a systematic way of integrating overwhelming perception without losing yourself in it. Phase 1: recognition and differentiation. The first task is brutally simple, but life-saving. Learn to separate what belongs to you from what belongs to others. Jung called this conscious discrimination. He instructed patients to spend time in complete solitude each day, not as an escape, but as a laboratory. Let the psychic noise settle. Let the absorbed material reveal itself. Only then can you hear your own authentic voice beneath the storm of projections. The first task is to establish what belongs to you and what belongs to others. Without this discrimination, there can be no individual development. Phase 2: shadow integration. The clearer you see the shadows in others, the greater the danger of denying your own. The more you repress your own selfishness, cruelty, or deceit, the harsher those same qualities will appear in the people around you. Jung knew this firsthand. He warned, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Shadow integration doesn't mean excusing darkness, it means owning it, recognizing that every human contains every potential, both light and dark. When you accept this truth, other people's shadows no longer overwhelm you. You stop being their mirror and start being your own teacher. Phase 3: conscious participation. The final stage is engagement without drowning. Jung taught his patients to develop what he called psychological containers, the ability to hold other people's unconscious material temporarily without identifying with it. It's the difference between a surgeon operating in a wound and a man bleeding out beside the patient. The individuated person can walk into a room, absorb its psychic tension, translate it into clarity, and walk out whole. They become bridges between the unconscious and the conscious. Not martyrs, not scapegoats, but translators of truth. Historical proof: collapse versus integration. Jung studied both outcomes. Nietzsche, consumed by his superior perception, collapsed into madness. He saw too clearly but never learned to integrate what he saw. His insight remained a weapon rather than medicine. Meister Eckhart, the medieval mystic, represents the opposite. He also perceived realities most could not, but he filtered his insights through humility and service. Instead of destroying him, his vision nourished others. Jung himself nearly broke under the same weight during his Red Book years, but by treating his gift as evolutionary rather than pathological, he survived and transformed his suffering into a psychology that reshaped the modern world. The choice. Here lies the truth Jung left us with. Your perception isn't a curse, it's an unfinished gift. Unintegrated, it isolates and destroys. Integrated, it becomes medicine for you and for the collective. You were not meant to suffer in silence because you see too much. You were meant to learn how to see wisely. That is Jung's most dangerous discovery, that some of us are born with consciousness ahead of its time, and the future of that gift depends entirely on one question. Will it destroy you, or will it transform you into exactly what this world needs?